Being to order, Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship.
There are no announcements and no addendums. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? So that takes us to the capital budget, and Councillor McDermott, I'll hand the chair over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll turn over the presentation to Jonathan Jansen, our Director of Corporate Services.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our capital budget night. Tonight's presentation is available on the town's website for anyone that wishes to follow along there as well. With report CBC-03-2019, the background for tonight's presentation. The agenda will look at the inputs and drivers to this year's capital budget. Some highlights in this year's 2019 program, the risks and opportunities that are included with this budget, the next steps involved with approving tonight's budget, as well as the next budgets coming up. Any presentation questions, followed by a review of the individual capital project worksheets that are contained in your budget package. So there's a lot of talk these days with municipalities of asset management plans, and our AMP, currently we have one approved from 2015 with a priority given to roads, bridges, water and wastewater, our core infrastructure assets. We are currently undergoing a revised asset management plan with GM Blue Plan. That 2019 plan is expected to come forward this spring and will be a much larger in scope update, and will be setting us up for the legislation in Ontario that requires policy and other things related to that. The plan has been identified by the province for grant funding. While this isn't known in great detail, it certainly is. We're seeing more and more requirement for checklists and for verification of what things we have in our asset management plan. The town identifies long-term capital requirements over the life of our assets, and that's addressed in the plan as well. The plan itself has a financial strategy. Our current strategy actually is one that's noted in the second bullet of the $500,000 per year. But the new asset management plan will be bringing forward a revised financing strategy for the requirements in the plan, and that's for our existing assets. For this year, for 2019, we have a proposed $163,000 approximately, or 0.6% of the levy proposed for inflationary increases. That's based on 2.5% of our existing contributions to capital, in keeping with our budget planning and guidance report. The second amount is the $500,000 I just mentioned, or approximately 1.9% of the total levy. That would be strategic long-term increases. That's noted in Table 3 of the report. And all this is in keeping with our reserve policy that Council has set, and some basic targets that are identified there. The budget and forecast planning and preparation is guided by the various studies and plans and determines asset priorities. The master servicing plans are used for most asset replacement and rehabilitation needs. For new or growth assets, the development charges background study guides the program. The current study, of course, the town council has seen the draft preparation of, expires at the end of March, and that process will continue in the coming weeks for consideration, where we'll be looking at some alternatives at the March 4th meeting. The 2019 capital budget is based on the existing study. The study, however, does indicate the intent to move forward with the projects in that study. The corporate review of our capital budget is also driven by strategic alignment and funding availability with meeting with finance, as well as consultation with any external partners and agencies, whether developers, the library, NPC, community groups, and so on, as well as the region. So the primary master servicing plans behind the budget that are to be integrated with the asset management plan are included in this chart on the slide. You can see a number of the current versions of these studies with planned or existing revisions. The larger ones being the water study master plan that was brought forward in 2017. The wastewater master plan will be completed in the coming months in 2019. The Parks and Open Space Plan is also underway and expected to be completed in 2019. The total 2019 capital budget it contains requests for 59 projects totaling $14.2 million. And this pie graph shows the breakdown for all the various projects by area. So the largest share, which reflects the cost of our assets, is the infrastructure services, with roads and bridges representing 34% of the total budget. If you combine all the infrastructure assets, the total part of the budget is 71%, of which 28% is for water and wastewater, which is supported by those billings. The remaining 72% is by the tax levy, or supported primarily through levy contributions to capital reserves. Other project components are the corporate and community services, planning and development services, fire, parks and facilities, museums, and fleet. Table 1 of the report and Appendix 1 and 2 contain the related specific amounts for each of these areas. The 2018 budget, just for some context, was approved at $12.7 million. That was amended to throughout the year with some various increases that council approved. The forecasted 2019 amount last year was $14.9 million, so very close to what's being requested here tonight. So the focus of the capital program in any given year is for what we own. 83% or $11.8 million of this program that's being presented tonight is for existing assets. Just highlighting a few of those here is the Lakeside Road water main replacement project of just over $3 million. $1.3 million for the road resurfacing program that's done annually by the town. $1 million for Highland Avenue sanitary sewer and road reconstruction, and just over $900,000 for bridge and culvert replacement. So that was for everything that the town owns. For new or growth assets, the total is $2.4 million or 17%. This includes a portion of the Lakeside Road replacement project for storm components of $1.1 million, $750,000 for Crystal Ridge Park improvements, and $140,000 for the McAfee Cemetery expansion. So this graph shows how the town pays for these items for 2019. The $14.2 million is paid primarily through the use of the town's reserves, just underscoring the strategic nature of and the reliance on that source of funding that the town sets aside annually. That is 78%, followed by federal gas tax of 10%, grants of 7%, and development charges of 5%. Each of these will vary in any given year depending on the nature of the projects of what's being brought forward. Of the reserve portion, or the 78%, that is $11 million. The capital reserves receive annual funding from the levy and from the water and wastewater budget as well, which council approved earlier tonight. as I mentioned earlier as well, there is both an inflationary and a strategic component to that we're going to be considered with the general levy on March 5th. The 2019 capital budget requests only, however, rely on the existing contributions that are included in the 2018 base budget. So any of those increases are not necessary for the proposed program, but are part of our strategic plan moving forward. The allocations for those new increases are based on reserve policy targets and included in Table 3 of the report. And it is worth noting that the town has made considerable progress in increasing these annual reserves over the last several years, including the repurposing of maturing debt. So this graph shows our current balance of reserves with what's in the current budget and forecast. It does show the growth of the reserves over the 10-year program based on 18 levels. The asset management plan deals directly with core infrastructure, and so this graph is broken down for both core and then water and wastewater levels. The 10-year levels look good in this instant with this graph. However, the asset management plans and the master plans that we continue to bring forward are showing the extensive need that the forecasts do not always align with in terms of keeping up with needs. The most recent provincial indicators show the town just below provincial averages for reserve levels. The other remaining funding components are gas tax funding of $1.4 million or 10%. The town receives $932,000 per year in commitments through that program. For 2019, $900,000 of that is being applied to the road resurfacing program, and the remaining $544,000 towards bridge and culvert replacements. Grants of $1.1 million or 7% relate exclusively in this case to the OSIF or the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, formula-based funding that the town has been announced to receive, and this is being applied to the Lakeside Road project. Development charges of $673,000. This is for projects that are currently identified in the 2014 DC study. There's no debt forecasted for the town or budgeted for 2019. The town continues to prioritize debt capacity for new and growth assets and is below 5% of the town's total own source revenues, which is below the provincial limit of 25% and considered low risk. We'll be needing to consider the town's debt and its role as the asset management plan moves forward, as debt is likely to be needed to play an increasing role with our long-term objectives. The budget and forecast is for 11 years, so 2019 and then 2020 to 2029. So the average annual capital program over the full period is $12.2 million. It shifts from year to year depending on needs identified in that year, of course. And this is fairly in keeping with historical levels as well. So again, the approval for tonight is just general approval. In other years, we will consider breaking the capital budget into two components so as to approve the parts of the capital program as early as possible. But for tonight, with the proximity to the general levy budget, the total approval is $14.2 million or $14,183,000, which is totaled in Appendix 1 of the report. The bylaw would come forward concurrently with the levy report on March 25th or on April 8th if additional time is needed to meet and discuss the levy budget. And the reserve funding requires 2019 levy contributions. Highlighting some risks. in the budget program. So with what you're going to be reviewing tonight, any new or growth assets have identified any direct impacts on the levy budget. So for the program being considered tonight, that amount is $80,767 per year added to the levy, or 0.31%, and this is summarized in Appendix 2. This includes increases for areas such as materials and supplies, contracts, casual labor, and amortization, which is the largest component for new assets. Asset growth also places increasing pressures on staffing levels. For the Parks program, this relies extensively on developer contributions that are cash in lieu of parkland, which are dependent on actual development and difficult to predict. The development charges are similarly dependent on developer revenues, and estimates are included based on current trends. The federal gas tax program was announced again in the fall, so there's some assurances there for the next 5 years, for 2019 to 2023. The OMPF, or Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, is a provincial program that the town has received funding from in recent years. That program is currently delayed in its announcement, and there's no current word on when we might hear about that. To mitigate risks with that program, the town has only included 50% of that funding towards the levy budget and identified the remaining 50% for one-time needs. So that has been applied in recent years to one-time capital needs as well, such as the road resurfacing program. And then again, the asset management plan currently is being undertaken, and will certainly identify and give us some more information on how to address the infrastructure gap going forward with greater clarity. Some opportunities are always additional grant funding. The town has a grants oversight team that does review and coordinate these opportunities from time to time. We're always looking for external federal, provincial, and regional funding to assist in defraying cost pressures with our capital program. Certainly in most years, other years we try to split the budget up, like I mentioned, to approve as much of it as early as possible, because early approval tends to help in minimizing costs. Debt, as I mentioned, will play an increasing role, but it's been minimized and provides capacity for emerging future needs and growth. And again, opportunities as well exist on the operating budget impact side, where some new or replaced assets may result in lower costs, such as greater efficiencies. The next steps for the budget are bylaw approval on March 25th or later, with the levy budget coming forward March 5th. The library and EDTC budget reports and presentations are scheduled for Wednesday, February 20th. There is the second meeting, if necessary, for March 20th. And I think that is it for my presentation. Thanks again to all the staff, all the many managers and directors that put time into preparing all the reports and capital worksheets that we'll be reviewing. A lot of consideration and good information that we'll be looking at in those. I'll be returning to the floor to the chair for any questions on the presentation, and then we will follow through with that in looking at the individual capital project worksheets.
Thank you, Mr. Jansen. Are there any questions from councillors on the presentation? Start with Councillor Zanko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Jansen. I'm sorry, I didn't get the number, the slide number, but you had mentioned that with regard to our reserves, Fort Erie is just below provincial levels. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, annually the province collects financial information through what they call the FIRs, and they look at your total reserves proportionate to I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head, but I believe it's in relation to our total expenses. So it's just a way of benchmarking municipalities compared to one another with where their reserve balances are. So for this last year, I think the provincial average was somewhere around 55 to 60%, whereas the town was in the low 50%.
Thank you.
Councilor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jonathan, can you go back to slide, I think, number 3? No, the one with the graph. It shows the, or maybe it was 13. I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go, yeah. Why is it that you're forecasting a lot less expenditures over in the coming years? It shows here after 2020, we're going to be spending less.
Yeah, through the chair to Councilor Luberts, this is a function mostly of asset prioritization for projects. So the bulk of the driver there would be through our infrastructure program. It's based, we prioritize asset replacement when they're at the end of their useful life. So certainly we would expect to see some swings and ups and downs. There's also, as we bring forward additional revenues, then there is greater confidence in increasing the program from year to year as well.
Yes, but why is it in what is it in 2021 that we don't have to spend money on?
Through the chair. For example, if you want to compare the yellow component from 2020 to 2021, there would be certain departments that would have exceptional years in the mix. So in that case, that would be the plans for the fire amalgamation. So that would be an example where from 2020 to 2021, there's a very large reduction for that one area.
So looking at this here chart here, would this give us an opportunity to put a little extra money in our infrastructure gap funding? Because there's, over the years, we were supposed to put $500,000 a year and add to that each year. Could this be an opportunity to start adding to the gap funding where we were short in the years past?
Mr. Jansen?
This isn't so much an opportunity, I would say, to advance additional funding as it is a reflection of our approach to stable long-term planning with reasonable annual programs. So trying to not overreact to our funding. So I'm not sure that's answering your question, but that would be my response.
All right, okay, thanks.
Councilor Noyes?
Thank you. In regards to the 2020, we see the big spike, and we see that the fire and emergency services are high. I understand in discussing it, that's where the debenture is going to occur, right? We're not looking at increasing substantially the taxes for next year because we're looking at a debenture.
That's correct. Part of the plan for that you'll see in the program or in the worksheet tonight includes debt.
Thank you.
Councilor Duvenel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Jansen. Just to expand on the question from Councillor Zanko regarding our reserves and how we sit just below the provincial average. And I apologize if I'm catching off guard because I only just saw this right now. How do we sit as compared to other municipalities within the Niagara region, if you have that information?
I do not have that information with me tonight. That's something I can provide to you later.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate that.
Councilor Noyes?
Thank you. Just to add to that, if you can, if he's going to look into it, I'd be interested in regards to basically the same question. However, in municipalities of between, let's say, 25 and 40,000 people, because sometimes it's not just a location, it's the volume.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Noyes. The one best piece of or source of information for this might actually be the BMA study. That's an annual study that includes a lot of provincial comparisons of financial information. And I know there are charts in there that are similar, if not identical, to this metric. And in there, you can see the complete listing of those numbers. But I will certainly send something out related to that.
Okay, are there any further questions? Your worship.
Just wondering if we could get some clarification on slide 12, with the gas tax funding, 1.4 million, but then in brackets, $931,000 per year commitment. What does that actually mean?
Through the chair to mayor, the annual commitment we receive is the allocation. So we are able over multiple years to accumulate and spend in some years more than others. So at this point, we're able to spend in 2019 more of that funding that's built up slightly from last year in the current year. So on average, we are able to spend $931,000. But this year is slightly more.
And just in relation to the capital projects that we're anticipating and projecting, where do we stand in terms of the 2017, 2018 projects that we have undertaken and have funded? Are we, in other words, are we able to manage the level of projects that we're budgeting for?
Through the chair to mayor, the short answer in terms of reporting back to council for that is twice annually we bring forward a capital variance report that does allow council to see the status of various projects, as well with our second quarter financial variance report. We do also provide a variance report at that point as well. So we do bring those forward regularly. In terms of staff availability, certainly that is a consideration in bringing forward any of these projects. Each department ensuring with the resources and the work planning for the year ahead that there is capacity.
So just in a short sentence, where do we stand, say, in terms of last year's projects? Are we able to, or how about if I do it this way, Mr. Chair? If we're budgeting $14.3 million this year and 16 point something million next year, do we have the capability to actually deliver those projects within the year that they're budgeted or the following year?
Mr. Jansen?
Yes. Is that short enough for you?
Very short, and I commend the director.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to the worksheets, get to the meat of the act? Okay, so let's start out with page 4, photocopier replacement. Comments or questions? Page 4 of the worksheets, photocopier replacement, copy 19, 2019. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. IMS 19 IT computer hardware. Any comments, questions? Moving on. Phone replacement, phone 19. Comments, questions? Moving on to the next page. Server and core infrastructure replacement. Comments, questions? Moving on. UPS S19 battery backup replacement. IT equipment reserve. Comments, questions? Website revamp, corporate and community services. Councilor Lubitz.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is the last sentence in there. There's a design and needs assessment study. I'm wondering if we're going to go through with this anyway and it's required and we need it, what would the benefit of a design and a needs assessment study be? And maybe we could bypass it.
Thank you, Councilor. Mr. Davis?
You done? Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Luberts. The design part of the process is to look at kind of almost like a needs assessment in terms of what the town would use the website for. So we use it for transaction, for communication, for work processes, those types of things. And we'd also like to use that particular study as a way to ensure that our website stays current and the processes within Town Hall that allow it to stay current and the workloads that are involved. And it would also be the graphical design moving forward.
Mr. Luber?
Yes, well, thank you very much, but don't we already know what we need? And as far as making sure it stays current, that's something that we would do on a day-to-day basis, right? And we wouldn't need a needs or an assessment, right? The only thing I'm looking at is,
Sure.
is there a possibility to bypass that study because we already know what we need and how we're gonna implement it?
Mr. Davis?
Is there a possibility for
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair.
save?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think the challenge that we face is that we think we know what we need, but the challenge is to go with best practices in e-government and get professionals in here that understand the needs of the public and how we can use that website to better communicate with the public. I don't want to make any assumptions that we're the experts in this area. It's more of a business plan moving forward. And certainly the graphical design in terms of how we maneuver around the website is very important. I don't have those skills, or our staff don't have those skills. And with respect to the second question in communications, a lot of those processes that are internal, we want to make sure that the information flows through the proper channels so that our marketing is pushed out the way it should be. So everything will flow out through our communications director, our communications manager. We want to make sure that each of the departments understand what responsibilities they have with respect to pushing information out to the web.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If through you to Mr. Davis, are you using a VPS system for the new?
Explain what you mean by VPS, please.
A VPS system?
Yep.
So, but to handle better traffic throughout your website, what system do you use currently?
Can you just elaborate on that in terms of tracking our flow?
Not just for tracking, but the traffic that comes through your website to be able to handle the traffic that comes through so it doesn't crash. Is that what you're going to be
Oh,
using?
yeah.
VPS system.
My apologies.
That's okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, in terms of our flow or our traffic counts coming through, our capacity is high enough to handle anything that we've ever seen through Google Analytics, and I know that our communications manager takes a look at that. I don't have any worries about our broadband or our flow into our system. It's the capacity is there to handle that.
And just wondering if $80,000 is just perhaps an inflated price, just to be sure that you have the money to cover the expense.
Sure.
But it could be considerably less, couldn't it?
I guess anything's possible through Mr. Anything's possible. The way we came up with that money or that budget figure is we approached a company that's been doing a lot of design work for different municipalities throughout Ontario, a company called eSolutions, and asked them for a budgetary number. And then what we did is followed up with another municipality approximately our size to get an idea if that number was realistic, and that it was a realistic number.
Anything further? Mr. Dubina?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, just very quickly to Mr. Davis, it says here that the website has been current for the past 3 years. Now, I know that looks like a short period of time, but in the information technology world, that's an eternity. So I'm just wondering if, is this something that you're finding is the kind of the provincial average right now with regard to turnover to websites, that this is something that's happening on that relatively quick basis, or are we facing a challenge specific right now that needs to be addressed?
Through you, Mr. Chair. What we're finding is that these things turn over constantly. So we've been looking at kind of a 3 to 5 year window in terms of when we want to flip this website over and redesign it. Generally based on feedback that we're getting from the public, from council, from staff especially. And we're finding that even within our own group, so my peers at other municipalities, they're looking at anywhere from 2 to 5 years of replacement cycle. And where we're getting a lot of pressure right now, and what we want to do is make sure that our social media aspect that our communication manager looks after is kind of incorporated into the communication flow that goes in and out of our municipality. Hopefully we're going to capture that as part of the design of this website. That's the real challenge, is making sure that those social media mediums are addressed, and we're responding to people in a timely manner.
Covering for engine 6218. Councillor Dubina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that there had been some discussions in the past as to whether a covering would be the most appropriate way of protecting the engine, or whether we do something else. I'm just wondering if we approve this here, if it would include all contingencies based on what would be the best to preserve the life of the engine rather than just a cover itself.
Through you, excuse me, through you, Chair, to the Councillor. Obviously, if it was totally enclosed, it would be a better situation, and we'd have to do very little in the future to maintain it. But what we're looking at right here is we need to go out for prices. And currently, we don't have a specification that we can go out with so that all bids received are bidding on the same specifications. So we're looking for an engineer to provide that to us. As part of that process, we can look at a full building for it. I think the price will be through the roof. It'd be extremely expensive, but it's something that we can have some preliminary discussions about.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. And I appreciate that. It wasn't, it's not even so much my concern as the need for a full building. I know some of the discussions that have come up were with regard to perhaps the best way of being able to preserve and maintain this engine is to have no covering at all, to make it easier for equipment to get in there to, do periodic painting and other works to the engine. So I'm just wondering if that would also be included as a contingency here as well.
That's something we can look at for sure.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Just a question, and this is not tongue-in-cheek. It's about a foundation and designed to withstand high winds. I'm hoping the high winds here in Fort Erie that the person who's doing this is looking at. I think tonight we're supposed to be getting 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. So, what happens here, what happens perhaps someplace else, whoever this consultant is has to be very aware of the direction of the wind. And when we say high winds, we mean high winds.
Any further questions? Your Worship?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if the covering large enough to also include the caboose will be a provisional item in the request for proposals.
Yes, it will. Yep.
Thank you.
Park accessibility improvements. Comments or questions? Park accessibility improvements. Moving on to the Bernard Beach Boardwalk. Comments, questions? Councillor Zenko, and then Councillor Lubert.
Thank you. Just a comment kudos to Councillor Butler, actually. I know I've even heard from residents in my area that are concerned regarding the aesthetics of this beach. So I think that with you and the Director of Infrastructure, it was very innovative, this approach. So kudos to you.
Councillor Lubert.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a question on taking a look at the, I guess it's page 24, and how this pipe is out of the sand. And if I'm reading this right, it sounds like they want to build a structure that's going to hide the pipe. And my concern is, how is this going to get built to prevent any damage, weather damage, and, well, not so much ice, I guess shove ice. When we get a good winter, that ice is going to get pushed up onto the shorelines. And how is this going to be designed so that we're not putting money into it on a regular basis?
Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll be retaining the services of a landscape architect that will take weather conditions into account and hopefully design and we can fabricate a structure that's resistant to everything.
Anything further, Councilor Lubert?
Well, I'd like to see what it is that we're approving before I think we approve it, because I've been along the lakefront pretty much all my life. I can see what the ice does. I know what the storms will do. And even our waterfront park in Crystal Beach, we've seen that it'll take sheets of concrete and throw it around when we get a good storm. And it'll take, we had a shed up there, threw it around like a rag. So before we spend $50,000, I'd like to see some kind of design that we can reassure ourselves that, you know, in the event of our first windstorm, that this thing isn't going to end up on Thunder Bay Road.
Mr. Walsh, do you have anything more to add to maybe allay Councilor Lubert's fears?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we do plan on holding an open house once design is complete. Solicit comments.
All right, well, Mr. Chair, I'll support the putting the money aside, but when it comes forward, we'll have to take a close look at it when it comes forward.
Thank you, Councilor Lubitsch. Councilor Noyes.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. I have the same concerns about, not that it shouldn't be done, but can it be done successfully? Because I can remember one of my terms on council, we built a boardwalk. I can't remember whether it was the boat launch or someplace else, and it was in pieces after a bad windstorm and had to be totally rebuilt. And so how they build it with it being so close to the shoreline, I think is going to be difficult. But hopefully they can come up with something. But the other thing I think that this would add to the project is that it's going to help access to the water, if I'm not mistaken. And right now, sometimes there's so much algae and other stuff that you can barely get into the water without walking through all the muck and stuff. So I think this will, it turns itself off. It really does. I'm not doing anything, and it turns itself off. So I think that there's, beside aesthetics, I think it will help with access to the water.
Mr. Cook, did you want to add something on this?
I did just briefly wanted to add that in our discussions that we did talk about a platform that was removable in the winter, that we could pull it up on high lands or move to the Gibson Center when it wasn't in use.
Well, I think we all look forward to that design. Any more questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Crystal Beach Waterfront Park dock replacement. Your Worship?
Just wondering what kind of revenue we generate from that boat launch.
Mr. Jansen? Mr. Walsh? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I don't have that information in front of us. We do have the numbers broken out. We provide that to council.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, what is it that we plan on doing with the old dock? And the reason I'm asking that question is, could it be sold maybe to some of the, like maybe Birdie Boating Club or some of the boat ramps or marinas in the region?
Mr. Walsh?
Mr. Chair, we'll take a look at the condition of the materials we pull out and decide if they're in any sort of salvageable condition at all. I'd be loath to sell them to a boating club only to have them sink 2 months later, and even if sold as is, have them come back at us for damages somehow. So we'll take a good look at them and decide if there's any salvage value from then on.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Walsh, but I think everybody understand that if you sell it as is, it's as is, you know. I mean, we can't be worried about if it's going to fall apart. We weren't worried about it falling apart last year when we put it in for ourselves, you know. But like I said, I know the docks, yes, they need to be replaced as far as the municipality goes, but I'm sure that they're still in pretty good shape for other people to be using them, and we could recover some of our costs.
Anything further, Councilor Lewis? Councilor Noyes?
Thank you, Mr. McDermott, Councilor McDermott. I'm in support of this. My question is that the price is being $100,000. I'm sure it's going to go out for tenders. But in this, we're not planning on making any major changes to the appearance, the length, or anything else, right?
Mr. Walsh?
No, this is strictly a replacement project.
And if I can continue, so the steel, I'm assuming there's steel beams that are going down, they're going to be retained and used. We don't have to replace them.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? We'll move on to the Crystal Ridge Park improvements. Okay, so we'll move on to neighborhood park enhancements. Comments or questions? We'll go to the Friendship Trail asphalt replacement. And now move over to the Kinsman Pool consultation study. Councilor Noyes.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. I'm concerned about yet another study on the project that has been studied and studied and studied it was studied when I was on council. That was 8 years ago. And we paid money then for a study. I think there was 20,000 or 30,000 raised by Splash the Pad or something like that. Fundraisers, and there was that study that they paid for. Now we're talking about another study. I know time has marched on, but I'm concerned about, yet again, spending another $50,000 towards a study. I think, and I could be wrong, if council wants to go ahead with the pool, I think we should make that decision one way or the other. I'm not saying we don't determine the costs, but I'm saying maybe cut back that $50,000 for yet another consultation study. I find that to be just one more study on something we've pretty much studied to death, no pun intended.
Comments or questions? Mayor Redicott?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just for clarification, this study will address things like the potential location of the facility, will identify potential cost, and will suggest to us alternate sources of funding. Is that to be included in this study and consultation?
Mr. Cookett?
I'll jump in first. I know Mrs. Hanson's here as well. She may want to jump in, but this study will look at the needs of the community because they're ever changing. Is a pool all we need there, or should be a Olympic pool? Should it be a pool with a splash pad? Should there be a kids pool? Those are the things we'll be looking at, as well as, is this the ideal location where it is now, or is there a better location? So these are the things that we will be looking at. I don't know if Ms. Hanson wants to jump in.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we also have, as Councillor Noyes referred to, done a few studies in the past. So this will also, I think, assess whether those studies are still relevant. The last study that was completed presented 3 or 4 different options for replacement of the pool. So I think we need to determine whether that is still relevant or not. And those prices are still relevant and it still meets the needs of the community.
So the only question that wasn't answered yet is, will this also look at potential alternate sources of funding?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can certainly look at that. It wasn't contemplated in the direction that was given to council, but we can certainly add that to the scope.
Well, it's specifically in the resolution that was passed last May. And somebody's got to be looking at this. I don't know who it is. I don't know whether it's this study, but somebody's supposed to be looking at identifying funding sources for the study. So funding sources for the study. So this is, we've identified it. We're paying for it. But I thought we were going to be looking at other funding sources for the facility.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was discussion about that in the past, and there were members of the community that came forward and offered to develop a fundraising strategy, but we can certainly look at that through this process.
And just to be clear, I'm thinking of more than that. I'm thinking of, are there government programs that might be available with respect to this type of facility in the community?
Yep.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear, Your Worship, on what you're thinking, and that is that just like the skateboard park, we would be looking for provincial, federal partners.
Any funding that might be
stuff
available
like that,
for anybody, even if the region wanted to throw some money in.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. And I'm all for funding, and I'm sure that the town continually looks for funding partners in this. And it was Dash and Splash was the fundraiser before. I'm just wondering if I can, in this case, would it be more make more sense? And I know this sounds weird, but put the cart before the horse this time. I mean, if we at least have a ballpark idea that's going to cost, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4 million. I think that we have a pretty good idea what it might cost. And if we don't have the stomach for that, then this is not the year to do the study. Maybe we want to put money aside for it eventually. And if we've decided that, okay, this is going to be 4 years down the line, maybe that's when we should be putting the money for the consultation in regards to design and build, because things do change. So we could put all this money into it and then decide that we can't build it. And then 4 years down the line, another council is going to say, well, we have to look at it again. Let's spend another $50,000. I'm just wondering whether we should first make the decision in regards to whether this is something we want to pursue, what the timeline is going to be, and what the appropriate time to actually start these studies are. I understand there's good information that comes from the studies, don't get me wrong. But if we're not going to build it in the next 4 or 5 years, the relevance that's going to be gained from these studies are going to have to be redone again in 5 years.
Councillor Dubinow, and then Councillor Zanko.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With regard to the pool, I think it's important to point out that we really can't get anywhere as to determining the need in the community, where it goes in the community, or any other things unless we do this study. We can't even get to the point of being able to apply for provincial or federal grants unless we have a project that is essentially shovel-ready. That's what they look for. So, yeah, we can keep deferring this study and deferring it over and over again, but the fact of the matter is that the Kinsman Pool is at end of life. It is going to, my understanding is, it needs to be taken out of service due to limitations in its design and the continual maintenance that are required in a very relatively short period of time, perhaps even during this term. So if we do not do this study, my concern at this point is that we're telling the community, no, we're going to continually defer this pool. We're going to close it again. And frankly, as a resident of this community who's been through this before, I don't want to see us go down this road again. I think we need to do this study, determine the need in the community, where it goes, and what we're going to build. We need to do it now so that when the need to replace this pool happens in the very near future, we have the study and we know where to move forward, instead of then saying, okay, well, you know what, maybe now we should do a study, push it back 2-3 years. Let's do it now. Let's get everything moving, and then we can determine where we go from there.
Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually was going to say very similar words to what Councillor Dubineau had said, but I can also tell you that I was the seconder on this original resolution, and I can tell you that, in fact, the Kingsman Pool is at its last legs, per se, so there really isn't time to consider whether we're going to do this. And to Councillor Noy's point, we don't have 4 years to decide. I think that it's, you know, something that we need to do. I know last year it was something that we needed to do. So this gets at least the focus on the table.
Councillor Luberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was on the council when we brought forward the report back in 2011, and the reason we never moved forward with it was because of the cost. And but having said that, there was a lot more to it than just a pool. So I would think that what we needed to do with this council is decide, if we're going to build a pool, then we're going to build a pool. Let's spend the $50,000 on the design and the location. Let's not spend $50,000 on a study to see if past studies in this here to confirm whether they're the relevance of the past studies. We already know what the past studies told us, right? And in 2011, if I remember correctly, it was about $3 million. And I don't think council had an appetite for that. But council may have an appetite for an outdoor pool in the town of Fort Erie. So why don't we look at that instead of spending another study to see if the old studies are good? Why don't we spend a $50,000 study on designing and finding the location for a new pool in the town of Fort Erie? And let's just cut to the chase. We're either going to build a pool or we're not going to build a new pool, and forget doing all these $50,000 and $60,000 studies.
Councillor Dubineau, and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in agreement. I would like to see the pool built, so I'm in favor for it. And if the majority of council is in favor for it, then yeah, let's cut to the chase and get the design going. I don't know how that works, though. Can we do that or can we not? I don't know. That's a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are a municipality of 30,000 people of all different ages, all different abilities. We have a Kinsman Pool right now that provides swimming lessons through bingo funds to children in our community. We're surrounded by water, and we're able to provide free swimming lessons to kids. We need a pool. Simple answer to that. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. We need a publicly owned pool that serves the residents of this municipality. The concern I have is if we do not do a study to determine exactly what that pool should include, a lot has changed in the last couple of years. We have changes to accessibility standards, changes in technology. The demographics of our community have changed. Where is the population growing? I know that there's certainly an appetite to include it in the same area, but we need to be able to defend that decision. And if we do not do a study like this to get all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted, then that, to me, is telling me you don't want the pool. And I have an issue with that. We need to do this study to replace our pool.
Councilor Lubert.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just to say what a comment on Councilor Dubenow. Councilor Dubenow, am I interrupting you? Thank you.
I think the chair can.
Okay, thank you very much. And anyway, I don't know that the majority of council is sitting here saying that they don't want a pool, right? What I'm saying, what I'm hearing is the majority of council is saying we're either going to build a pool or we're not going to build a pool. So if we're going to go through with this here, I'd like to make an amendment that staff spend the $50,000 on the design and location and of a pool for 2021 or 2020 budget considerations, and we can discuss it this year, and next year we can put it in our budget. But I'm not in favor of spending $50,000 on a study to see if past studies are relevant. That's what this is for. That's what this study is for.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That, I believe that motion is out of order in the sense that we would have to defeat the recommendation in the budget and then move on to something different, because that's completely different. What we've got here is a recommendation in the budget to engage a consultant to do a community consultation. Councillor Luberts is talking about design. So I would think that you'd have to defeat this rather than bring an amendment.
Well, I would look for someone I'm willing to put the motion to the floor that they put together a design, right? If council wants to defeat it, then you can put that motion. We can add that.
No, that's somewhat backwards. This would have to be defeated.
That's right.
Then you could bring forward another motion.
Then you could bring forward another motion. I understand that, Mayor Redekop, and I'd be willing to sit here and listen to that discussion come forward. I'm not going to approve, and I'm not going to support $50,000 for a study to see if past studies were relevant or not. But I think that this council is prepared to vote in favor of defeating this and then vote in favor of putting a motion forward to have a design study done and for the funding to be brought forward in next year's budget.
Okay. Okay, we're not going to do this all night. So let's go one more round and we'll put it up and let the Councilor Nice.
Again, I'm looking at the second paragraph because the first paragraph, number 4A, it really isn't what we're deciding on tonight. That's just background information. We're really just saying that we're going to spend $50,000 to confirm the relevance of the past studies. That's pretty much what we're asking for. And I think $50,000 is a lot of money to confirm if the past studies are relevant or not. And that's all this thing is doing. It's not going any further than that. It's not talking about location. It's not talking about anything else. It's just talking about the past studies.
Councilor Butler.
Mr. Chair, I'm getting confused in all of this. So I'm wondering if we can ask Ms. Hanson if she can comment on it.
Ms. Hanson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to what Councillor Noyes just brought forward, I think that that's something that will come out of the study, but that would not be the whole intent of the study. I think through the community consultation process, we can ask the preferred location, we can confirm what the community would like to see in an aquatic facility, because that's what we really are looking for, is some type of aquatic facility. We can address funding sources as well. And through that, I think we will be able to confirm whether the past study is relevant or not. If the community is looking for something completely different than what's was identified in the past study, then we'll very quickly pick up on that.
Thank you. So, let's call the vote. All in favor?
The report hasn't been put on the floor yet. We're just reviewing the. Somebody has to move it onto the floor. It's not even on the floor yet.
Thank you, Worship.
Chair. So we're just moving this one item for now. Oh, the report itself. So we're just going through these for the time being. Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna defer this till later.
Ms. Hanson, could you come back to the podium one more time, please?
Thank you. Just in the recommendation that you have, it does say that based on the outcome of the study, that a new design or alternatives can be developed if appropriate. So I'm reading this as it's very possible that the design work or consideration of design work may be included in this study. Am I not reading this properly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our interpretation of the motion that was passed by Council last year was to go through a community consultation process and through that confirm the designs that the community is looking for, the location and whatnot. If we're expecting detailed designs to come out of this process or construction drawings or something like that, I think the scale of the project would be much greater.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, I wonder if we shouldn't put the report on the floor. Then as we're going through this, if we hit an item like this, we can deal with it because we've already got the report on the floor, and then we can keep going, because it seems pretty clear that everything up until this point, everybody's okay with. And so when we get to the end, when we pass the report, that'll include all of this. But if we hit some more of these patches, I think we should deal with them at the time, one way or the other. So I'm going to move that we put a report CBC 03-2019 on the floor. Yeah, so I've moved the report itself. I'm not suggesting that we vote on each one as it comes up, but that we hold them till the end unless there's something that crops up that we don't agree with. Then we can vote on it and then just keep moving forward to the next snag. No, so I put this on the floor and then I think we should deal with this now. And so we can then keep moving afterwards. Reports on the floor, and this particular item with respect to the Kinsman Pool, I now move to put on the floor.
Comment on it? Amendment. No, but we're gonna make amendment, right?
If this is defeated.
Well, then I need to comment again because we were going just through the whole report and then we come back later. I'd like to make one last comment. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Hanson, if I could direct this here to you, and maybe I'll make an amendment to what we have here, because I don't obviously they don't want to defeat the report. But if you're telling us that we can expand what we're looking at, then what I'm trying to say to everybody else is let's just cut to the chase and let's get a design in here, right? And location. We can go through the public process and add. Would there be a problem with that with your department?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that through this process, as it's written right now, we will be able to confirm or select a location for the pool. My question would be to what extent does council wish to take the design of the pool? There are various stages in the design of the pool. There's conceptual design of the pool, then you get into detailed design where you start to cost all the various elements. And I'm kind of comparing this to the Bay Beach washroom and the various stages we went through with that. And then there's construction drawings as well. So there are various stages in the design, conceptualization, design, and detailing of the pool structure and the pool facility. And I guess my question would be how far you would like to take that, because I think that affects the funding that needs to be allocated to the project.
Yes, well, what I'm looking at here is we're looking at a community consultation process, which is already in there. And in that community consultation process, we could discuss design. That would be in the, and then we could come back with options and costs for those options, right? That would be in the scope of the study.
At a conceptual level, yes, which is similar to what was in the past study.
Here, right?
Pardon me?
But we could do that with this here report instead of defeating it and making a new one. We could just amend it to include design options.
Through you, Mr.
Cost options.
Yeah.
Right?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That was done in the second report in October of 2011, and through this process, we would be confirming whether we did the same thing. We did designs for the pool and costs as well. So we could certainly look at those, and if the community isn't happy with it, we could look at alternatives, but it would be at a conceptual level.
Thank you very much, if I may, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Hanson, in 2011, that report was not just for the pool, it was for an aquatic facility. What I'm saying here is we're just dealing with a pool, not the whole aquatic facility, because that aquatic facility had splash pad, it had other elements to it, and this here would just be for a pool. Because that's basically what we're looking at here and here is public consultation for a public pool. And even if there's other things, right? We already know what happened in 2011, right? We weren't prepared to spend over $3 million on an aquatic facility, but I think council would probably have an appetite for a pool. But what I'm asking is, can we amend this to have design and cost options instead? And then for the pool itself, then, because once you get the report done, now you got to go into design. You got to have another process, right? And pay somebody for design and all that other stuff. To me, it doesn't make sense.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the resolution of council was to look at a new outdoor aquatic facility. If council wants to give staff the direction just to look at replacement of the pool, and that's it, that's fine. When we're looking at aquatic facility, we're also considering the building. And I know that there has been desire from the community to include a splash pad in this area. I know that the Central Fire Department or station has expressed an interest in fundraising for it. So if council just wants us to consider a pool, and that's sort of the decision on where you want to go with this facility, that's fine. The resolution does reference an aquatic facility, so.
Okay. Now. Councilor Sanko's before you in this case.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the question.
Okay, then, we have to vote on what is presented here. So,
We have to vote on whether we call the question. We have to vote on whether we call the question.
on whether we call it. So, we're voting on whether we call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Carried. So, we go to the question. All in favor of what's on this page? Opposed? Then I have to vote, right? Yes. Okay. Carried. So we'll move on now to the Stevensville mini park playground replacement. No?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll try and keep this brief. I know that this park is due to be replaced a little early due to vandalism, and certainly I have no issue with that. What I'm wondering, and with this being Ward 6, I didn't have a chance to talk to Councillor Noyes about it, but if she's agreeable, I know over the next couple of years we're replacing several parks. We have master plans in place. We're going to be purchasing playground equipment for numerous parks, and I'm just wondering if there's perhaps some opportunity for savings by purchasing in quantity, where we could replace these parks all as a block, where we could get together, figure out what equipment we need for the parks, and then do it as one block, which could potentially save the taxpayers money, allocate the funds, but then maybe wait until we have an opportunity to do some bulk buying. And I'm just wondering if that would be agreeable to council.
Mr. Chair, that might be a great idea. I don't know that there's any savings on these because each of these parks is a little bit different, but this park in particular, I don't know how many communications I've had with respect to this park. I don't know how many people have been engaged in this park. We had community groups involved with respect to this. It's a very well-used park. It's in an area of the town where there's been a lot of growth and development with the new subdivision. So I think that whatever we do with the other parks, this one I'm very much in favor of moving forward with this year. As I said, I've had no end of discussions with residents.
Councilor Noyes.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. Obviously, I'm going to be in favor of the replacement of this park. It is very well used, but it is a shame that one of the reasons that it's coming a little earlier than it had to be is because of the vandalism done. So I'm very happy to see that there's going to be some video cameras and surveillance and that hopefully that will then prolong the life of this park. And there's actually a part of the park that's actually missing. Not missing that somebody took it, but missing in that it broke and it could not be replaced because the manufacturer is no longer in business. So, we have a part of this park that can't, or the playground equipment that can't be used. But I appreciate Councillor Dubineau's comment about, I'm sure Sydney tries whenever she can find efficiencies in volume. But again, each park is done differently, and I'm sure she'll look for it. Thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Oh, no, we're not voting.
Sorry about that. I just got you.
I moved the whole package.
Barriers.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't know, maybe I direct this to Mr. Cookett or Mr. Brady, but I know that when we were arguing over the Bay Beach issue over the years, there was a lot of rules and regulations when it comes to access to road allowances. And if you put a gate or a chain across the road allowance for certain numbers of years, then you can, there's certain things that can happen, and you can lose your status as a road allowance, or you can lose different statuses. Well, Mayor Reddick, I'm only going by what I read and what I was told.
Municipality can't lose the right of ownership of a road allowance.
Access. And I'm just curious as to what's our legal, if there's any legal ramifications of blocking off a road allowance and not allowing access, because we lost access to a private road along the beach in the ruling from the Deputy Director of Land Titles. So I know what Mayor Radicott seems to think, that no, you can't have, that can't happen, but obviously it did happen. And we're the municipality, and we lost that road.
Okay, so let's, so sure he might be able to enlighten us.
Thank you. The intent of these barriers is to not restrict access, but rather to restrict inappropriate vehicular access. So it does not allow, you know, quads and those kinds of things to access the road allowances. We've put this type of facilities in place on a number of road allowances already. The ones down in Edgemere, and we went through quite a process in terms of dealing with them. They're working fine to the most part. These are road allowances that are being used for a variety of purposes, and we want to ensure that the access is maintained for the public, but not to allow vehicles. So what they'll do is, if you look to the page 42, you'll see there's a gate there, and then there is a lock on it. And if someone absolutely needs to use it to launch a boat or whatever, they can come and do that as well.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Brady. All I wanted to do with this here is just make sure that those comments were on record, and in the future, if there's any problems, we'll know that we were assured by town staff that we wouldn't lose access.
Are there any more questions with regards to the waterfront barriers? Okay. Universal access improvements. Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. And I don't know what the answer to this is, but perhaps Ms. Hanson can answer it. Are any of these strategies to look at ways to along the waterfront involving Black Creek at all? Because I know there's 5 possible accesses there. Are we
Ms.
not being
Hanson?
specific in this?
Anybody else? Okay. Moving on to replacement of bunker gear. Comments, questions? Councilor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I guess we'd direct a question to the fire department. We're doing the same thing we did in the past as far as working with, I know in the past we worked with Port Colborne and purchased equipment to help offset the costs and get a better deal. Are we doing the same thing this year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. We are part of the regional buying program for bunker gear.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anybody else? The replacement of firefighters' helmets. Your worship.
Mr. Chair, just wondering how many helmets this budget allocation purchases.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this year will be approximately 110 helmets that we'll be purchasing.
So this will do the number, the whole thing.
Yes, this is all of them.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to recruit protective equipment. Comments, questions? Seeing none, moving on. SCBA replacement, fire equipment replacement reserve. Councilor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't have a problem with replacing, but looking at the cost of it, $800,000 at one hit, I'm just wondering if there's any way that in the future we can start looking at staggering something like this year and then replacing, you know, so much of it one year, so much the other year. And the only reason I'm doing that is just to kind of soften the blow on the taxpayers. Instead of having a $800,000 cost all in one year, we could break it up over a 5-year period or something. Is there a possibility of doing something like that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. This year we wouldn't be able to. We're switching from 2 completely different systems. So we're currently in a standard that allowed for 2,216 PSIs per the bottle. Now we're switching to a 4,500 PSI bottle. So the systems are completely incompatible.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Okay, is it a possibility in the future to start looking at something like that? Just on these higher end, like.
Yeah, in the future we could potentially look at splitting these over 1 or 2 or over 2 years.
Councilor Duveneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Jansen, perhaps you can clarify, would something like this be funded by reserves over a period of time so that the taxpayers are going to pay the same regardless of how we replace it?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll move on to the refurbishment of training tower infrastructure. Councilor Luberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a simple question. Are we putting monies aside for a total replacement of this facility? I'm sure that sooner or later we're going to have to replace the whole training facility, right? Are we doing that?
Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Chair, I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer.
Mr. Jansen? You're the money man. You answer the question.
Mr. Cookett.
To you, Chair, to the councillor. Presently, we haven't forecasted the replacement of this building. I'd have to take a look at our recent facility assessment that was done by our facility managers to see if it was included in that. I can't recall right offhand, but I could let you know if it was included in that assessment.
Yeah, I'd like to see something like that because in the future, we're not going to get hit with, you know, I don't know what these things will cost you, but, you know, I'm sure that it's probably $500,000 by the time you're done. All right, thank you.
Fire station number 4. Your Worship.
Mr. Chair, I wonder what the savings is by our need not to have to replace pump 3 in 2021, which is referred to in the body here.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The estimated savings would be about $700,000 to replace a pumper.
That's good, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Butler and then Councilor Luberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if I could just get some clarification because I'm struggling to understand this. If we amalgamate the 2 stations and we have the 2 buildings that we can put up for sale, what do you think would be what do you think the sale would bring in to help offset some of these costs? Or am I totally off base here?
Through the chair to Councillor Butler, on page 57, it does reference land sale as part of the funding. If you go look at the other page, so that has been factored into this project.
And that is what I was trying to find out, because is it 400,000 per building that you're estimating, or 200,000 apiece?
Yeah, that factors in both sites, yeah, for sale.
But it is possible that you could probably get more, right? Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lubberts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question to the fire department. Do we, have we just found a location yet? I'm not gonna ask where it would be, but are we at that point? Or we have a place where we decided where we're gonna build?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've identified a couple different locations, and this will be part of the architecture and engineering on where we decide where the facility will be located.
All right, and any idea of when we would be announcing anything like that?
End of the year? Yeah, probably the end of the year.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Else? Okay, moving on. To the Birdie Place water main replacement. Comments or questions? Highland Avenue sanitary sewer and road reconstruction. Lakeside Road water main replacement. Prospect Point Road upgrade R6C. Councilor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, I know that the roads need to be done, but with all the construction that's going on at Prospect Point and Thunder Bay Road, that neighborhood there, is there any way, I don't know if is this just design work that's going to be done? And I'm just wondering about the timing, because I don't know that we want to be running all the heavy equipment up and down a newly paved road. Not saying that we won't do all the work, but can we just put the base coat and then do the finish coat when the construction's done? I'm not sure.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll certainly take that into consideration, but I'd like to add that most of the heavy construction in this area is complete already. There's house building to do, certainly, but that's not nearly as much as infrastructure improvements in the 2 developments or 3 developments in the immediate area.
So would we be restricting the entrance and exits to the other developments so that they're not using Prospect? Could be coming in from, say, Far Avenue?
We would certainly take a look at routes if we thought there was an issue. Right now, we don't think there's an issue.
All right, okay, thanks.
Anybody else on that? Okay, moving along. Prospect Point Road Friendship Trail to Highland. Royal York reconstruction. Guide rail replacement. Councilor Dubenall?
Not related to this, but I'm just wondering,
Beg pardon?
we're coming close to curfew, and I know we're almost done, but I'm just wondering if we need to extend by a couple minutes.
Thanks for that. I think we should be out of here by midnight.
No, don't worry about your curfew.
We're just finished up with that guide rail replacement. We're moving on to road resurfacing program on page 75, Councilor Lubberts. 2019 bridge and culvert replacement. Uh, 2020 bridge and culvert replacement. Uh, 2019 sidewalk repair program. Yes, sir. Young Hop, oh, I'm sorry.
I just had a question about this.
Go ahead, Your Worship.
So we've got a lot of development going in, and we're seemingly moving towards a walkable community, or at least one that utilizes a variety of active types of transportation. And I'm wondering whether 200,000 is adequate. It's been $200,000 for as long as I can remember. And I'm just wondering whether 200,000 is adequate.
Mr. Chair, or through you, Mr. Chair, to the Mayor, a couple of comments here. The first is that the $200,000 seems to be the limit of what our contractors can take on. The contractors that we get also do curbs and sidewalks for development and other infrastructure projects. So this is kind of limited that way. But further to the conditions of the sidewalks themselves, we are seeing a general improvement in quality by spending $200,000. So I'm not advocating for any more.
So, Mr. Chair, I wonder if between now and when we approve this, if the Director of Infrastructure Services could find out whether there is capacity for more work to be done, and then we can maybe contemplate whether we should be allocating more. I've heard what the Director has said, but the reality is we are trying to encourage people to be more active and to walk, and we have a lot more parks. We're going to be spending a lot of money in parks over the next few years, so I wonder if that's a possibility to inquire of the contractors whether there is any capacity for them to do more.
Is that a possibility, Mr. Walsh?
Mr. Chair, I believe contractors express capacity through their pocketbook and their bidding opportunities, and those opportunities we're not seeing those opportunities present themselves when we put this contract out every year. In fact, the past year, the 2018 year, the contractor we had on board, we took work away from them at the end of the year that is being added to this. So we have money left over from 2018 in reserve that will be added to the 2019 tender package.
That's enlightening. Maybe at the next Infrastructure Services Business Subcommittee meeting, we can chat about this.
Does that mean you're coming?
If we, I was at the last one, and if you put this, if you put the things I'm interested in on your agenda, I'll show up.
Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just further to what the Mayor had mentioned, and through you to Mr. Walsh, I know that the Fort Erie Active Transportation Committee is getting ready to put forward a master plan. So it's interesting because I'm wondering how this will affect their master plan, as I'm sure there's going to be areas that are identified that require additional sidewalk programs.
Mr. Chair, this program looks after our existing facilities, repairing what's in disrepair to minimize the liability to the town. As I've said to council, and I believe Mr. Brady or his employees have as well, the active transportation plan will identify new and missing links and prioritize new construction. Those will come forward as a separate budget item up and beyond this.
Councillor Lubitz?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Walsh, is it possible that we could break this into two sections and have sidewalk repair and then new sidewalk installation and then have two separate contractors? Is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no new sidewalk installation under this contract. So this
That's what I'm saying. Can we have this year to repair broken sidewalks, and then have a separate contract to bring in someone to put in some new sidewalks?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, we'll certainly look at that when the time.
Okay.
Time
At our
comes.
next infrastructure meeting. Yeah, Mayor Redekop, we got something interesting on the agenda. New sidewalks.
I thought the last meeting was quite stimulating.
Want to go for the 10 now?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we extend curfew by
More than 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah, we should get. All in favor? Okay, you had the floor. You can have it back if you want it back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to verify that the mayor's going to be at the meeting.
Oh, which meeting? Was that the sidewalk meeting? He'll be there. Okay, so let's move on to the Young Hop Wagner Municipal Drain. That's on page 84 and 85. It's the northwest boundary between Port Colborne and the city of Niagara Falls. Apparently we have some. Well, let's find out.
Okay, I guess the question is, how come we're doing this? It's not in the town of Fort Erie.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are, the city of Port Colborne is leading this. We are contributing to the development of the report right now.
Maybe you can clarify the map.
The
I'm seeing it as in Niagara Falls and Port Colborne.
No, through Mr. Chair, although the creek
drain
itself,
does enter the lands of Fort Erie.
yeah, the drainage area includes Fort Erie.
Oh, okay, all right.
So let's move on. The Nye Road Sewer Shed Trenchless Rehabilitation. Mayor Redekop?
Project that we would be applying to the region for potential funding, CSO funding.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we already have.
What do we do?
Yes, we do. Oh, I haven't, sorry. The application was submitted last week. We haven't heard back.
I like the first answer better.
Anything further?
Not even close.
Councilor Noyes.
Thank you. Very much in support of this. I'm just wondering, do we have even like a ballpark idea of how much extraneous flow this may prevent? And then therefore, I know, we have to crystal ball gaze there, but how much we may save in regards to treatment costs? Any idea what we're hoping for?
Crystal ball back there?
Although I have crystal balls, I don't look into them that often. Based on previous similar projects, the reduction in extraneous flow is almost 100%.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
So we'll move on to the Thunder Bay Trenchless Sewer Rehabilitation. The Nye Road Water Main. The Smith Street Water Main Replacement. The Water Meter Replacement Program. Councilor Noyes, and then his worship.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. In regards to the radio frequency that I think the meters are being changed to, what are the cost savings that we're anticipating? And this is, if I understand, you can just kind of like drive by and you just catch them all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the previous cost for hiring a meter reader, if you'll correct me, Mr. Jansen, was about 60 grand a year. We're down close to 15 grand a year now. We still have a number of water meters that need to be read by hand. We're looking to eliminate those costs shortly. So we're saving quite a bit a year on them.
Worship?
John says higher.
I was just wondering what number of meters this amount of money will replace.
I don't have that answer, Mr. Chair. I can get back to council on that. These are larger 2-inch meters, so the number is significantly reduced from what we've been doing in past years.
Thank you.
On to the fire training center roof replacement. Gibson Center expansion. The Leisureplus structural repairs. Leisureplus flooring replacement. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. I was recently in the elevator there, and that there's no reference to there. The floor in the elevator is really bad. Like, I mean, it's like sponge and it has a dent in it. And I didn't see any reference to that. It may be included in this, but I would encourage someone to look at the elevator. I had a client in there, and I was really surprised at how much damage was done to the floor of the elevator.
Thank you. We'll take a look.
Thank you. Anybody else? Park washroom building rehabilitation. This is for a number of parks. Workplace violence prevention upgrades. Sure. You want to go back to the park washroom building restoration?
Yes, I just have a question in regards to they're going to, I understand, installing better tamper-resistant fixtures. Will they also be like motion sensors? Because I know they require a lot less maintenance. At least that's what I've been told. More expensive, but in the long run cheaper.
Mr. Chair, I'm not fully conversant in the actual fixtures, but we can get back to you on that.
You get back after you talk to our facilities guy and let us know. Oh, thank you. Okay, workplace violence prevention upgrades. Crystal Ridge Community Center HVAC replacement. Crystal Ridge Community Center fire and life safety. Crystal Ridge Arena dehumidification unit. Crystal Ridge Arena refrigeration panel replacement. Crystal Ridge Library interlock paver replacement. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. In regards to replacing the interlocking brick that's there, will they be sold, or what do you do with them? Is it, again, a potential revenue source?
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, typically we allow the contractor to dispose of them at their will.
Your Worship.
I'm just wondering if similar issue at the Centennial Branch is being considered, whether it's on a work plan, because the bricks there are quite out of whack in comparison to the curb. Same problems.
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that was an item in last year's capital budget, if I recall.
So it hasn't been done.
That would be correct.
That's because the sidewalk people are busy?
If you had only gone to the meeting.
Mr. Chair, can I get back to council on that?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you.
So we'll move to page 118, which is the Gibson Center asphalt replacement. Worship, or I'm sorry, Councilor Lewis.
Not yet.
Time to go home.
Not yet. Obviously, this will be done after the Gibson Center expansion, right?
Mr. Walsh?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this area is not in the area of the
All right,
proposed
okay.
expansion.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so Leisureplex exterior lighting upgrades. The municipal campus concrete repairs. The McAfee Cemetery expansion. Councilor Noyes.
Thank you, Councilor McDermott. Is there a recovery in regards to the people who buy the lots and stuff for any of this, for any of this money that we expend to purchase a property? I don't quite know how all that works.
Jonathan?
Through the chair to Councillor Noyes, there is a fee for lots, if that's what you're referring to. Yeah.
Considering that, I'm just wondering, will there be some cost, therefore there will be cost recovery? Will we be recovering the full cost, or will we be recovering like 50%? Like if we spent $150,000 to purchase more land for burial sites, how much do we make, like, not make in the end, but how much does it cost the taxpayer at the end of the day?
The fees are set in the annual fee review. I don't believe there's a good relationship between recovery fees and the land cost. I think the fees for the lots, primary consideration would be benchmarking with comparables in other municipalities. There is a cemeteries master plan that may speak more directly to that. I'm not sure if others may comment.
Anything further, Councilor Noyes? Your worship.
Just 3 questions. The first, this is an expansion to the west of the existing cemetery?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And the roadway that is going to be expanded, which roadway is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the plans haven't been done yet. I know we do have, or a neighbor has expressed concern regarding it. Once we have a draft layout done, we'll be in contact with that person.
That was my third question, and that is, are we going to try to direct as much of the flow of traffic within the cemetery itself and utilize the roadway perhaps for service vehicles?
That was the intent when a draft plan had been put forward a year ago now, when we were contemplating the purchase of the lands.
So then my final question is, as this goes forward, if it's approved, what kind of consultation will there be with there's actually two neighbors on McAfee Street. What kind of consultation will there be with them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll bring them in for an individual meeting, show them the plans, get their comments off.
Great, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Any more on McAfee? Moving on. To the Parks pickup truck. Your worship?
Chair, just a couple of general questions. When we replace these vehicles, and I know this one and then the final vehicle that we're talking about, they're quite old. They don't seem to have a lot of mileage on them, but do we track things like how much we're now spending in repairs on these vehicles to determine that it's now time to move them on? We get to that conclusion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do track them, and when repair costs or future repair costs, short term, are nearing the salvage value of the vehicle, we know it's time to get rid of them.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Parks lawnmower? The water wastewater dump truck. So we have moved to our worksheet. I'd like to thank you all for being so kind to the chair this evening. Councilor Noyes.
What if there's something that we want to add to the capital budget that's not on here?
Good question.
Move it.
Jonathan?
Certainly, you can move to bring something forward.
Thank you. I'm looking for some support for some crossing arms at the rail crossings in Stevensville at East Avenue and Ott Road. I know we're not going to get it all this year, but if we start looking forward, I know putting some money aside so it eventually gets done. I have talked to Mr. Walsh, and he's working on what we need to do and what the actual cost would be, but I would like some consideration in the budget if possible.
Jonathan, would this be part of the capital this evening, or would that be part of the supplementary?
These would be things we'd have to all consider. We do have thresholds with what would be considered capital. So in the absence of some of those estimates, if information is not known tonight, it is something that can come forward at a future date, primarily if it's reserve funded without an impact to the levy. CAO has a comment as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clickett? Fill the old chair in here.
It must be getting late. I'm not sure exactly what the councilor is looking for. Are you looking for us to put some money aside for future installations? Is that what you're looking for? Basically set up a reserve, and then once we've done a review of and a study of, then we could pull from that reserve. We can do that, but what I would suggest is we let Mr. Walsh work his magic and look into a little further, and if need be, we can always do a budget amendment later on once the budget is passed. Is probably a better approach.
Thank you. Then I'll wait for future opportunity of bringing it forward.
Okay.
Fully, like so many new homes, and it is a problem.
Oh, yeah, and it's all about safety, so, you know, I'm certain we won't have a problem with that once we get all of our ducks in a row with that. Thank you. Okay, so are we ready to vote on this report? All in favor? Opposed to Benny? Carried. I'll hand the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. Excellent job, Councilor McDermott. So we've got some meetings coming up Wednesday, February the 20th, March the 5th. Hopefully not March the 20th, but if necessary, can I have a motion to adjourn? I saw Councilor Dubineau first. All those in favor? Opposed? Indifferent? That's carried. Thank you.